In recent news, places like Kentucky, Ohio, and Virginia have recently had elections, and many of these states that were once looked at as red states are flipping blue. And of course, the chief reason behind it is related to abortion measures. And so, women being the biggest voting bloc in the United States, it doesn't come as a surprise to see many of these, would be, red states, as they say, are turning to these feminist states where you're going to see more of this moving forward. And so it doesn't surprise me, in the realm of voting, that people just don't understand the foolishness of giving women voting rights, because this is the stuff that women vote for. Women vote for the ability to kill off their offspring. And of course, how do you as a nation survive without any children? That's a problem for the future. Something else that's also talked about in the future is, well, think about it. If women are not having children, and men and women really don't need to live together for the purpose of having families, because typically why men would go out and work and sacrifice, and this is why you see women having a larger share in the workforce, because there aren't men that are there to take care of them. And so, through government welfare and corporate welfare, they're able to hold down many of these jobs. And so, moving forward, for many men, there is a niche to be filled, which is going to be in the realm of sex and stimulation. Where are men going to get stimulation from? This is a huge market. You see this with prostitution, you see this with men going the route of OnlyFans, or they're using. There was like another article that's linked in here that talks about an influencer who had created some AI, um, sort of a program that she sold, and people could chat with it, and it was like their AI girlfriend. It was just basically a simulation of her. An ex-Google executive talks about the AI sex robots will seem alive and eliminate need for other human beings. And of course, this is his way of saying basically we would be eliminating women from the dating market. The needs of having a woman. We see this already, right? Women were like, in the past where women would cook and clean, they take care of your children, and of course they don't want to do any of that. So then more and more men are like, well, then why do I need a woman? Outside of the obvious, especially nowadays where women are just promiscuous, right? So women are adapting to the environment that men are creating. And so as women are in essence being phased out, the need for women, I don't know how to have anybody to cook. You can hire a cook. You can cook yourself. It's you have all these uh, things that were created. Like you can get shoot. I mean, even with something as a conventional oven or buying like an air fryer, you can get most of your cooking needs met very easily. If you need someone to clean, you can hire a maid. They're very cheap. Even here in the city, you can get a maid, for like $25. They come $25, $30. They'll come for do an hour's worth of work. And of course, maybe there's like a stipulation on how many hours that they require you to pay. But realistically speaking, in terms of actually having a wife that you have to financially take care of, there's really no need for women, because everything you needed a woman for, either they don't want to do or they offer up freely, especially if you're a good looking man, you take care of yourself, you're in shape, etc. Uh, Getting sex nowadays, there was that article that talked about, I think it was like 1 out of 3 men are virgins or haven't had sex in the past year, which means that the vast majority of men, 66% of them, are having sex. And so as women have to find something to do because now they're forced to support themselves, well, then this opens up, of course, new areas. And this is why you see a lot of women nowadays going to things like seeking arrangements, utilizing OnlyFans, going on Tinders and all these different apps to try to find a man. And so many young men nowadays are looking at many of the men who are my generation and older, right, as a Gen Xer, and you look at many of the celebrities and they're just getting taken to the woodshed, right? You have Al Pacino was a good example. He got taken for 30,000 a month for the mother of his child, and it's like you could have just got a surrogate for 100K and washed your hands. You could have just paid for it, right? You could have just gone out to Colombia to DRX, and of course we don't advocate for that, but the reality is the experience is basically what he was purchasing, and that was a pretty expensive experience. It's going to cost him the better part of $30,000 a month until he dies, because he's an old man, and he could have just, in essence, just paid for it and saved him a lot of money. It would have been a much better experience. And for many men like that, and it's typically the old men. It's typically the old men. They get ensnared. They get lured in. Oh, you have to have a relationship. And of course, this is often pushed by the women, because men control access to both sex and relationships. And so all of these men get pushed into relationships, and then they get stuck for their paper. And so the article goes on to say this was one of the chief executives from Google, who had said human beings will soon be able to simulate sex through virtual reality, right? Remember, think about like if you saw Demolition Man with Denzel Washington and Sylvester Stallone, and Stallone had like that headset on with Sandra Bullock, and they simulated, stimulating his neurons that they were actually having sex. And of course, he was from a time period being stuck in cryo where he was like, when he was alive, they were actually having actual sex. And so this is what he's referencing. This is basically what he's referencing, where it talks about things like the Apple Vision Pro that is going to merge reality with VR, or the new Quest 3. I have a Quest 2. And I'll tell you, utilizing the Quest 2, the sounds are very good. Visually speaking, a lot of it looks pretty good. And of course, moving forward, you're going to see the realism within virtual reality just become outmatched from what we see today. It says the headset combined with AI powered bots will trick people into thinking that they're having sex, that they're thinking that the sex robot is real. And this is according to the Google exec. He says, and then I kind of like this point, which is a reality that he openly admits when he makes the statement. Just think about all the illusions that we're now unable to decipher. And when I read that, I was like, wow, that's pretty powerful that he made that statement, where he said there's a lot of shit right now that you think is real, and you're not able to decipher the fact that it's not. And he's not just talking about just recently. Talking about history, education in the school stuff. A lot of the stuff that we think is real, right, that we imagine is real, that actually happened, that is happening. And he's like, y'all don't even know that this shit is fake. And so he's like, if we're able to do that now, what are we going to be able to do in the future in terms of fooling humans into doing things? He says, but if we can convince you that this sex robot is alive, or that the sex experience in virtual reality headset or an augmented reality headset is alive, it's real, then there you go. He goes on to state that technological advances will enable computer-backed systems to link into the human brain, right, which is what Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink, and make it think that it's interacting with a peer. And of course, they give this rudimentary version of what, some of the robots look like now. And these are what sex robots look like, not sex dolls look like now. And it says, and if we think a few years further and think of Neuralink and other ways of connecting directly to the nervous system, and why you would need another being in the first place, right? So think about it. For most men get into relationships because they think that they're going to have sex on a regular basis, and that happens sometimes, but mostly not, because you get busy. And realistically speaking, if you're a person who has stuff going on in your life, the amount of times that you're actually going to have sex with your significant other may be few and far between. If you're running your own business, if you work 60, 70, 80 hours a week, a lot of times that might not even be on your mind. You come home, you're tired. You might have a day out of a month where, realistically speaking, where I can dedicate one night, go out to a bar, find a woman, take her back, and that's it. But to assume the responsibility of a woman living in your house, the risk when it comes to the Me Too, etc., men have in essence adapted and phased women out. And so the environment that men have created, and women have adapted to that environment. Hence, OnlyFans, seeking arrangements. Many women now, especially places like in New York, going back out onto the street. They're going back out onto the street doing the world's oldest job, right? Walking the streets at night, skimpy little outfits where you can buy a bit. And so he goes on to state it's basically all signals in the brain. Excuse me. And so he goes on to state, there was a recently, earlier, the 23-year-old, and this was from this year, who did a Snapchat influencer by the name of Karen Marjorie, created a Chat GPT powered doppelganger of herself, and she made quite a bit of money. She was basically charging both over 1,000 boyfriends who each paid her $1 a minute for the service. And this was another person who ended up marrying of course, it was a woman, right? 36-year-old mother of two from the Bronx, who virtually married an AI bot that was created by the Replika app. And so, for a lot of people moving away from relationships in the future, as obviously the state needs to put these women to work to pay off entitlements, the risk versus reward of having a Western woman, I should say, in your life is too great. And so there will be alternatives to relationships. And one of the big things moving forward for many young people, maybe people like my age and older, this might not be something that is acceptable. But if you go but for many young men, right? How this woman talks about, I made a sexy AI robot of myself, and you can date me for as little as $1 a minute, right? So that's how little, like, people look at this and they're like, oh my God, this is simping. But think about it from the perspective, that's how valued women are, that she's worth $1 a minute. What I need from you, right, is I just need the experience. I can buy that for $1. Maybe I'll buy $5 worth. If I want to see you naked, I'll pay my $5. I'll check your videos and your pictures out on your OnlyFans. Anything more than that, many men are just like, I'm not interested. And so people look at this from the standpoint, and I did this in another video, talking about people look at this from the standpoint that this is men simping. And I'm like, no, this is men phasing women out. That the risk versus reward, the responsibility of having a woman in your life and to provide for her and to be her emotional tampon, however many times a month, the guaranteed time where she's going to be emotional, having to protect her, to be a source of protection, and all the things, like all the honeydews and the things that I want. You don't need to worry about any of that. They try to push men into relationships where they say things like, well, married men make more. And like, yeah, they have to. They're forced to. They're forced to slave for these women, go out and buy a big house, white picket fence, they got to get a dog, country club vacations, etc. And they're not even guaranteed to get the enjoyment that they want from their woman, because as women say, well, I'm not your slave, right? You're not guaranteed to have sex with your wife just because she's wife. She can refuse you. So then what's the point of being married? What's the point of being married? For many of these men, they're like, there's no point in being married. And so as the future continues to move forward, men will phase women out of their lives more and more. Of course, this will result in women falling into poverty. And so this young woman talked about how she had made an AI. It was like a little AI robot that basically, it was like, not a robot, but this is what she looks like. She's a very thin, obviously. And of course, because she's thin, in a world where, what is it? It's like 70 some odd % of Americans are overweight, 43%, I believe, are obese. So a woman who's this thin, right? She's high up, in essence, on the totem pole in terms of looks. And so naturally, because women favor resources typically over looks, especially as they get older, it's less of a necessity for a man to be to be in good shape as long as you're financially doing well. And this is why you see a lot of women go with older men, or many men who are out of shape, and you're like, why is she with him? It's overwhelmingly related to resources. And so even though she's a regular woman, you can see pictures of her right here, very plain Jane, right? Very plain Jane, nothing at all special. And as she gets older, whatever beauty she has will fade. Whereas looking at from an AI perspective, the AI stays young. And so if they can simulate in the brain all the things that women try to do, right? And women do this exact same thing. Women pretend to like you. They'll treat you nice as long as you're, upholding your end of the bargain. more than likely you'll get yours in the girlfriend sort of scenarios. But moving forward, for many young people thinking that they're going to go into relationships, your relationship might be with a robot. Your relationship might be with an AI personality that you yourself uh, kind of engineer for yourself, right? It learns what you like and what you dislike, just like these robots, right? This is why men refer to them as chameleons. So they learn to adapt, and so the AI will learn from you. It'll learn what you like. It'll learn what you dislike, and you'll be able to get all of your needs. And so, what will be the outcome for women and for countries that have to go that route? Well, you'll see birth rates, whatever they are now, are going to fall into the toilet. You'll see people less willing to work. You'll see people less willing to interact. And so as people become more antisocial, you'll see more women basically being phased out and into poverty. And of course the government will take every advantage of that, because these are their voters. These are the people who vote for this stuff. And so again, it goes back to, if women keep voting to put their children to death, then what do we need them for, right? What do we need them for? They don't serve any purpose for a man. And for many young men, this might be the route that they choose to go, which will make it all the more harder for the men who are willing to take on the responsibility of having a woman in their lives. Even harder for women to achieve. If women think it's hard now to find a man, what will it be like in the future? You'll end up going back to harems, and like the Bible says, in the future it'll be 9 women that say to one man, we'll eat out of our own work, we'll live in our own houses, just let us be called by your name, take away our shame. And this is the route that many women are going. She's young now and attractive. Many people might find her appealing. In 10, 15 years, when she's 35, when she's 40, no man's going to be paying attention to this woman. And so all they're doing is digging their own graves. And it's their choice. This is what they vote for, but realistically speaking, it's because the men don't want them. It's because the men don't want them, and the men are they're phasing themselves, they're phasing them out. And so it becomes obvious why women don't want to have children, because the men aren't looking to take care of them. The men aren't looking to provide for them. And so the women will continue to vote for abortions, because they know, regardless of what some men might say, the women know that the men aren't going to be there to take care of them. They know this. They're just not going to do that. And so it's to their advantage, because it makes it harder for them to be able to find a husband later on. And so this is why you see many young women pushing for abortion, because they know that if they get stuck with a baby from a guy and they can't get rid of it, and the guy doesn't want anything to do with them, well, then that's it. For the most part, she's ruined her chances at finding a relationship. And it's already this hard now. What's it going to be like in the future? Anyway, I'm going to leave you here. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.